During the 20th century, socialism spread around the globe, bringing to power men like Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot. All these men are correctly associated with despotism and poverty, the historical extent of which I am not here to debate today. Socialists may say that it wasn't real socialism, or they only went 1984 to fight the evil capitalists, but it's really a fatal flaw in the socialist ethic, which is why socialism tends towards tyranny, which is co-ownership. But first, we need to understand why ownership exists in the first place. Basic economics tells us that scarcity is a thing. Now, this isn't some kind of evil capitalist plot to enforce poverty. It simply means that one person's use of a particular good can conflict with another person's use of a particular good. For example, say you want to use your body as something to enjoy tea with, and I want to use it as something to shoot. We can't both have our ways, and the just winner in this conflict is said to be the owner. So how do the socialists solve this? By declaring that all goods are collectively owned. That is to say, that everybody in society is the just winner in a conflict over an item's use. Okay, perhaps the society is effectively a homogeneous mass, where everyone agrees on how to use the items. But assuming people have different ideas on how to use the items, some group is going to have to superimpose their usage onto other groups. And as established, the losers in these conflicts are by definition not the owners. So collective ownership immediately dissipates into the ether when faced with reality, regardless of whether the superimposition is decided through a vote on the matter or through a planning board. But there is a further failing of collective ownership. We all rank our goals from most important to least important. This is known as a value scale. Every person has a different value scale determined through a vast range of dynamic considerations, perhaps so deeply subjective that it cannot be explained. However, we can get an idea of this value scales through exchange. For example, we know where 1 unit of silver is traded for 8 units of cement. The prior user of the cement values the silver over the cement, and the prior user of the silver values the cement over the silver. But what would be the point of this interaction if both parties own these goods as part of a collective? Worse, remember, collective ownership is practically superimposers ownership. How would they decide which goods are economically desirable and thus should be produced without the information that exchange relations provide? Depending on how cynical you are, you may think that the superimposers would simply default to the value scales they know, their own, and begin producing goods to meet their ends and leave everybody else in poverty. Okay, but how does this cause socialism to tend towards tyranny? Well, there are now two options for the non-politicians who can't just superimpose their will onto the economy: sit and suffer in silence, or resort to extra legal suppliers to find the goods they want. Surely many, as do so now, would pick the latter. It's doubtful that these suppliers would do so for free. After all, there are clearly large costs involved with this prohibited production, which they would probably want to be reimbursed for. But now we have the rudiments of exchange, which is sufficient for the producers to determine which goods they should be producing to benefit the most people, and thus themselves. If left uninterrupted, more and more people would turn to these smugglers when the socialist system fails to meet their ends, as they are the only alternative. At this stage, people would realise that the capitalist system is the superior model, and so would begin to default to it. But what if they aren't left uninterrupted? Why would they be interrupted? Remember, those politicians specialise in using superimposition to achieve their ends? It's improbable that this skill would be viable where private property is respected, and so the politicians would be prone to impoverishment. They still have the advantage of controlling most of the society's resources, so how would they go about stopping the black market, assuming they don't want to live in poverty? The answer is through creating the apparatus of a totalitarian state. Firstly, massive propaganda campaigns would be required to convince the people that mutually profitable exchanges are in fact not beneficial to them. For reference, all exchanges are mutually profitable. It is the economics equivalent of 2 + 2 = 4. But convincing people that this is false would be necessary so that non-black marketeers would view the black marketeers with disdain. But to seriously deter the black marketeers, serious penalties would have to be imposed on them. This is why black marketeering was a capital crime in the USSR. After all, fines would simply be regarded as a business expense, assuming they get caught. Speaking of getting caught, there has to be a serious risk of actually being nicked to provide the penultimate nail in the coffin for the black market. And given the secretive nature of the black market, this could only be accomplished through a Stasi-style network of thousands of officers and tens of thousands of informants. Perhaps further fear could be created through black market exchanges being set up by officers to entrap the buyers. Finally, in order to convict these traders, arbitrary political tribunals would need to be established. After all, even after the propaganda campaign, would any jury be willing to sentence a person to death for illicit bread trading? Now, assuming you don't want a system where it's probable that a small cabal of politicians will end up using propaganda, secret police, and revolutionary tribunals for their own benefit, you might be considering what a superior alternative is. We can start by acknowledging that the very root of socialist tyranny, collective ownership, is pie-in-the-sky utopianism, and that only one party in a conflict can be the winner. So this leaves us with monarchism or capitalism. The capitalist ethic is based on non-aggression, that is, the prior user to a conflict is the owner of a good. The monarchist ethic can be defined as a particular aggressor, that is, the monarch, being the winner in a conflict. Which one is justifiable? Argumentatively speaking, only capitalism. Argumentation must presuppose non-aggression, else one could simply force his interlocutor into agreeing with him irrespective of the truth. Thus, any aggressive ethic must be falsely proposed in argumentation, and so the negation a non-aggressive ethic is true. But could such a society maintain a high enough public opinion of itself to legitimise itself to the inhabitants? Primarily through the fact that your hard-earned possessions cannot simply be taken from you, but as a byproduct of that, the efficiency and prosperity stemming from a division of labour based on this system. We can expect that everyone wouldn't always be willing to give their goods away, and that they would want something in return for them. So with such a system in place, why not specialise in the production of a particular good, so that when you come to trade, both of you have more of the goods that you both want? Even when there is an absolute advantage over your trading partner, why not have him produce, say, paper, thereby freeing up more of your time to make pens? And as the system produces more wealth for the inhabitants through greater production of goods, people would find it harder to argue against capitalism, ceteris paribus guaranteeing its continued existence as a free system. However, socialists will still hold dear to their collective ownership, and pretend that it is capitalism which tends towards all manner of horrific governments. Adam Something's assertion that capitalism would lead to theocracy is a perfect example of this, so you have to click here to see my refutation of this claim.